Hi, this is Michael Becker, and in this Tinderbox lesson, I'm going to use action code to show you how to change the display expression of a note. This is a particularly really nice thing to be able to do because you can add semantic value to the display expression, meaning the name that you see, not the actual name of the note, to be able to create semantic meaning for you as you look at your note through the various views within Tinderbox. So let me go ahead and show you how to do that. This training was inspired by jprint714, who had this question in the forum. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do that. So if we double click here, and I'm going to create a couple notes. This note I am going to call parent container. Okay, this note I will call note 1. I'll create another note called note 2. And I'll create another note called note 3. Now, I like to use prototypes when managing display expressions like this. Now, there's a few ways you can create prototypes. If you want, you can go ahead and just use and initially create a built-in prototype, which will give you the prototypes folder, and then you'll be able to create prototypes in this note. I'm going to show you how to do that manually though too, because it's kind of fun to be able to do that. So for instance, if I go in here and I create this note called prototypes, all right, so I've got a note called prototypes, and now I'm going to create an OnAdd for this function for this note. This is another example of action code. So if I create the OnAdd, what I'm going to say is the attribute is prototype equals true. So what this says is when I add a note to the folder prototypes, what that's going to do is it's going to turn whatever note I add into this folder into a prototype. So let me go ahead and show that to you. So here I've got a prototype, and let's call our note, let's call this note folder, and I'm going to drop it right in here. Okay, and so I've dropped it in here, and then magically this folder has become a prototype. Now how we know? Well, one, if I right mouse click on it, you'll see that the prototype folder is available. Likewise, if I hit Command 1 and I go look at the notes, the notes details in the document inspector, I can actually see that the is prototype attribute is checked. So I've now just created a prototype. And now what I want to be able to do is, since I'm creating a folder, I want it to be able to kind of look like a folder. So we'll go ahead and give it a folder icon, and maybe we give it a nice color too. So let's say we'll have all folders be this like cyan color, just for fun. Okay, so we have a prototype folder, and now what we want to do is go assign this here. So now we know that parent container is now a folder, and it's got notes inside of it. And so now our objective is to be able to have parent container tell us how many notes visually are in here without necessarily changing the actual name of parent container. So let me go ahead and show you how that's done. So what we do is we go in here, go to the prototype, and I'm going to go ahead and create what's called a display expression. Now the first thing I'm going to do is create a new user-generated attribute. Now you can do this directly in the display expression attribute, but I personally like to have what I'll call a placeholder attribute for caching values. And this works really well when you have larger files and you want to optimize the performance of your Tinderbox file. So I'm going to create a new attribute. Excuse me. Expression cache. Okay, and we'll call this new attribute display expression cache. And then what we want to do is we want to go and set the display expression attribute to display expression cache. So essentially what I've now done is I've said whatever's in display expression cache, and if I apply this, now what we're essentially saying is whatever's going to be in the attribute display expression cache, make that the attribute display expression. Okay, so that's the first step we did, is we created that attribute. Now what we want to do is for our prototype, we want to create a rule, and particularly actually an edict, because we want it to happen less occasionally. Or occasionally, not all the time. So what we want to say is we want to say display expression cache equals the original name of the note plus, and then we're going to add some space. So I'm going to say plus a space. It's a good idea not to put parentheses in note names because of parentheses are a core element of and kind of a reserved character for action code. You can do it, but I have the tendency of just wanting to put brackets. And so I'll say bracket plus, and then I will tell Tinderbox to put the child count. And so we add the attribute child count, and then we say plus quote, quote, and semicolon. All right, so from an action code perspective, let me explain what we've just said here. We're saying the display expression attribute is going to equal the name of the note plus a bracket, and then we're going to insert the child count and close it with a bracket. And I don't want this to run on the attribute itself, so I'm going to unenable it. And since I did that, I'm going to have to just retype it real quick. And so to say display expression cache equals the name, okay, plus space plus child count plus quote, close bracket, quote, semicolon. And again, as we learned in the part 1 of demystifying action code, the semicolon is a hard stop saying stop after this point, and then we hit enter to lock it in. The reason why that disappeared when I hit unchecked enabled is I hadn't hit enter before to lock this in. So essentially what we're saying here is we're saying tell Tinderbox to set the display expression cache attribute to the name plus the child count. And if you remember just a minute ago, we had told Tinderbox to make the display expression equal to the display expression cache. Now watch what happens if we go back here. And if we then go look at the note, and then voila, the note has now automatically updated, and it's showing us that there are 3 notes within this note. And if I go ahead here and watch this, if I create another note, note 4, and I add that into this note, it automatically increments and now shows me 4. So that's a great example of a fairly straightforward action code being applied in an edict so that it's going to be constantly running and updating my notes. Now, if I used it as a rule, it would happen a lot faster. The reason why I do it as an edict is I don't necessarily need it to happen that fast. I want to reduce the load on the computer and on the Tinderbox file. Now, going back to what JPrint714 had originally asked for, and I'm going to go ahead and show this to you in outline view as well, so you can see here that this also displays pretty nicely in outline view too. Let me put this down here, and now what JPrint714 had actually asked for is the ability to count notes, but don't include other what we'll call subcontainers. So let's call this one child can ups. Let me create a new note, and I'll call this one child container 1, and we're going to move these 2 notes into child container 1, and then we'll create another one, and we'll call it child container 2, and we'll push these notes into here. And so if we go and update that, you're now going to see, okay, the numbers changed because we've been calculating the children of this note, and right now we're only getting the children of the note, the child count. And so we're not actually, which happens to be these 2 containers. And we'll go ahead and make these folders because that's what we want them to be too. And so essentially we're losing the count of the children. Now there's a number of different ways that you can go about getting that count of those children. But in particular, what we want to be doing here is we want to say that we only want to get the notes counted, but not the actual subfolders, if you will, in this container. So let me show you how to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our folder, and we're going to update the folder's action code. And this time we're going to perform a bit of more operations with action code. First, I'm going to hit the option key and the return key to create a space in my action code so I can get a new line and to give me more room to calculate what I want to be able to do. So I'm going to say my number using the kind of the sandbox number attribute that we have within system attributes. And now I'm going to go apply some action code, and I'm going to use the collect if action. So I'm going to say collect if, okay, and then I'm going to put in the arguments. Now collect if, basically what it says is collect if children, descendants, etc. So let me say what I want it to do is collect if descendants. Okay, and then since it's an if statement, I need to give it the if argument. So I'm going to say if prototype does not equal P folder. Oops, it's not P folder, it's folder. Does not equal folder. Okay, and then I want it to collect the name. So essentially what I'm doing here is I'm telling Tinderbox, make my number equal to collect if descendants, comma, prototype does not equal folder, name. Now the collect if function collects all of the notes that meet this criteria. That is a descendant of a particular note, namely this note, and does not equal this criteria folder, and it will give me the name. Now in order to get a count, because that's what I'm looking for, I'm going to now use a dot operator, count. Okay, and then I end it here. And so now what I'm telling Tinderbox is saying, make my number equal to collect if descendants, comma, prototype does not equal folder, comma, name, count. And so what this is saying is basically go collect all the notes that are the descendants of this note parent container, and the ones specifically that are not the folders, and then count them, and then stick that into the attribute my number. Okay, now what I want to do is make my display expression equal to the name plus, and no longer child count. I want it to be equal now to plus my number. Okay, and then I hit enter to lock that in. And now if we go and what I did is I actually put this on, I put it on the container itself. So I want to actually update the prototype so that it happens everywhere. And now I'm going to go fix the inheritance of this note, and you'll see that it already automatically changed. So you'll see here that it went from 2 to 4 because now it's collecting. Let's go back to our edict. You'll see now it's collecting only the children note, the notes that are not folders in here. So if I go ahead and add now note 5, you'll see that is now note 5. So that's how you do it, or that's one way of doing it. There's a lot of ways, as is the case in Tinderbox. If there's one way to do something, there's 10. But I found this to be one of the most efficient ways of managing display expression and automatically updating the notes. If you have any questions, please let me know through the forum. I've helped you found this video useful. And as always, if you don't mind, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you much. Bye.